Alright, Internet. So, a quick Iceland Gender Utopia general update. Should actually start calling this topic the Iceland Gender Dystopia. Quite frankly, that's what it is. So, yeah, I briefly touched on the topic of Reykjavik energy. Initial quick timeline of men's backfiring of 20 years of devout gender and equality agenda company. Copious amounts of resources spent, people hired, etc., etc. And now it turns out that entire corporation, a publicly owned corporation for which I have to pay, is now basically completely ridden with this toxic tumor of crude communication, potential sexual harassment, um, power struggles, and affairs that basically seem to truly stifle the workplace culture. Doesn't look like a pleasant atmosphere at all. We won't know until, given that we get a proper research, a proper investigation. But there's big questions there already. We won't know until we've had a proper investigation exactly the extent to how severe, how long this problem's been manifesting itself the way. All of this while the CEO was giving his beautiful speech, beautiful interview to 60 Minutes Australia about much of a bastion of egalitarian affairs and equal pay and mutual respect and all that good stuff. And it was so good for business and all these kind of things just months ago. It's mind boggling. It's very shocking, truly disturbing. So, on top of that, there have been other stories, and one in particular with this American artist, Megan Boyd. I think I'm not. I hope I'm not butchering her. Just make sure. Yeah, Megan Boyd. So she accused Paul Tirason, the drummer of the Icelandic band Siguros, of which you may have heard. If you haven't, it's fine, but somewhat sizable worldwide. So she accused him of sexual misconduct or assault, or she. It looks like from the context of it, she might be insinuating it was a full-on rape. But yeah, a sexual assault that allegedly happened back in 2013. He has refuted this. Now, obviously, this is quite typical. We've seen a lot of these things thrown around, but what makes this case particularly interesting is the fact that this drummer is married to a journalist, or I would say more of a journal activist, who also happens to be at the forefront of the two movement and prominent in a story that I did a few months back. The leak from the feminist group, Feminist File leak, where they'd been plotting to take down the hashtag Daddy2 movement. We're actually talking strategies to run a smear campaign against the men in that movement. Openly talking about this in a secret little group on Facebook. It got leaked. And she was in that group, and she's been pretty harsh on the hashtag Daddy2 movement. She's been a staunch advocator for believe her, hashtag believe her, often the hashtag there as well, that women should be believed, or accusers of sexual violence should be, no matter what, which puts her at a conflict now. So, and I have some, in spite of everything, that I consider really, really foul and vicious and inhumane out of her conduct, I still have some sympathy for her because she's in a very, very tricky position, and I am not a man without empathy. I can understand that this is um her life is absolutely turned upside down, and if I think you're vicious in most of what you do and somewhat evil, I still don't wish that upon you. To learn a lesson, hopefully you don't have to learn it this hard a way, because this is a hard way to learn the lesson if she does. So, but she's in a position now where she has to a drop this idea that you should just automatically believe everyone who brings forth an accusation, which case she has to apologize for a lot of things that she has said and done in public discourse to other people. Huge public apology to the country because she's been a public figure. She's also participated in some of the lashes out against others, so she would have to show an apology and publicly announce that she was changing her stance, or she could maintain that stance and then she would have to now come to terms with that according to her stance she's married to a rapist. That's that's not something that's easy to reconcile, because that means that either she's gonna have to say, a I'm married to a rapist but I'm going to choose to remain married to him, or b she's going to have to file for divorce. So it's a very, very tricky situation. It's basically three options. A, drop your entire stance that you have religiously advocated publicly and issue apologies to a whole bunch of people as you change your conviction. B, acknowledge that you're married to a rapist and stay married to a rapist. Or C, get a divorce. Those are three very, very tough options. So, yeah, but at the same time, she's been in public life, she's been a public voice. I don't think it's unfair of the Icelandic society to to urge a response from her and for her to actually express herself on this issue. Now, till now, she hasn't done that. I get that as well. This is still very recent. It's shocking. She's going to need some time. I'm willing to give that to her. But at some point, whatever, however she makes up her mind, I sincerely believe the public, the society has the right to know, and urge her to express herself whenever she's ready. Express herself about that and take a firm stance on that, because yeah, this does put things very, very conflicting. Now, she's not the only one, of course. This movement who's very close to this guy. I mean, she's married to him, so obviously that's about as close as it gets. But she's also friends with everyone else in the feminist inner circle, and the hashtag Me Too movement, and they all know her, and of course they all know him. This has been tied into the artistic scene, into the music scene, so they probably know him not just as an extension of her, but outside of them as a married couple. And not just him, but the rest of the band. And what he's already done, this poor guy, he's been accused. He may or may not be guilty. I mean, I'm not judging the guy. If he is guilty, well then, I have less of a sympathy for him having to leave the band. But if he's innocent, then that's pretty tragic that he already had felt compelled to leave the band that he's been building for many years, along with the other guys. It's got to be devastating, but he did leave the band because he didn't want to jeopardize work. So yeah, it's tricky, but and he also took a stance that he didn't want his wife to be bothered with it, and she's gone off social media to, according to what I've heard from people who looked that up and kept track of it. I haven't, I do admit myself, gone there, looked her up, and tried to push for answers because, quite frankly, it's fresh. I'm humane. Rub salt into the wounds. I'll give it the time. Yeah, this is it's quite something. And at the same time, now with all these things going down, feminists have been pushing hard recently in the country to make gender studies um, obligatory study topic in well, this is kind of a tricky thing with the Icelandic education system. So you have pretty much have what equates senior high and junior college kind of in one. Let's call it college because then you go to university for your bachelor's after. So let's call them comprehensive college, I think would be appropriate term. So they want to make it a mandatory topic at colleges. Uh, yeah, that's an entire conversation in and of itself. And I very recently went to one of those meetings where we're in a teacher who's teaching gender studies at a college like that, wherein the kids can choose to take that course. Uh, she was arguing as to why it should be made mandatory and why it was valuable. It went a little bit back and forth. First of all, it was very murky as to what gender studies is and isn't. Seemed to be very sort of loose, exactly how each teacher would teach it. I didn't get an awful lot of what the exact premise of the field is. All these, it was so relative to this relative little thing and that, and relative to the teacher and whoever approaches it. And at one point in the thing, she was well, I'm not teaching gender studies. I mean, I'm not a gender studies. I'm a teacher. I'm not a gender studies professor. So I'm teaching equality. Okay, so then let's look at what's equality, and then of course this claim that that feminism is equality, and you can't be for equality if you're not a feminist, which is quite the opposite in my book. If you're a feminist, the feminists and feminism and equality doesn't go hand in hand in this day and age. But mainstream use of feminism, mainstream equality, it quite frankly doesn't fly empirically with me. Now, if they can prove that it does, I'm always willing to change that. But they haven't proven a lot of these the points and premises they make. So I mean the whole thing with for instance gender and pay with Dr. Jordan Peterson has touched upon this quite a bit. You a multivariate analysis of all these factors that come into play. It does challenge this claim that it has to do with gender itself, that there appears to be a pay gap in some fields. So yeah, basically, if you don't factor in all the other variables that do play a part, then you're not doing the proper science. So and it's very hard to measure like that. Then there's another thing that I would counter that with. I uphold the claim that there's no such thing as equal pay for equal work because there's no such thing as equal work. And to support that claim, what I say is, regardless of what you study, now you go to school and you study a certain thing, you have a certain resume. Now, all of your degrees and diplomas and everything that you've learned and studied and past experiences and everything, that's a fraction. That's a little bit of a like a roadmap. It's a blueprint of where you've been, what you've done. It doesn't really take into account what you've learned on the way, what you've taken away from this journey you've been on. It's kind of like making a journey around the world, and you list all these different airports, things you visit in each country, so forth and so on. That would be the resume, and then you come back, show the list of countries you visited, airports, sites, foods, things you did. It doesn't really demonstrate how it altered you, your perception of the world, your take on things. You know, the, the entire the entire wealth of the experience, if you will. So that's one of my problems with that. Another thing is that, you know, the whole thing going back, tracing you back through the whole evolutionary line, everything that comes into our genetics, and what happens from conception in the womb as we're born, all throughout our upbringing, our entire self, up to the point when we start studying the topic that, you know, leads to this job that is in mention, if you will, or the job opportunity, if you're looking at whether you should hire the man or the woman. All these things, and our lifestyle, what we do from when we wake up till we go to sleep, how we take care of our health, everything that constitutes all of which is you, matters in and how you do things, how you make decisions. So you can have two people, seemingly same qualifications on paper, but then you put them to work and they work differently. They can be, you know, one can be more efficient than the other or less efficient. You put 10 people out there on a factory table, they're not all going to work at the same pace. The fastest one or the most efficient one is the one who's underpaid compared to everybody else. Especially compared to the one who's, yeah, just kind of slacking around. I was that guy myself back when I was a teenager studying in factory work. I'd be ruining the whole factory, the company bonus for everybody else. It was terrible. Um, yeah, so I was very much that guy. I had my mind was everywhere else when I was starting out as a teenager. Doing My mind was everywhere else. I was I was hardly worth my salary. In the very beginning of it, but quickly did I learn. And it was a harsh lesson. A lot of it had to do with those who were actually trying to get a good bonus, trying to be efficient, who'd been there for 10, 15 years at a job that nobody should do for that long. A lot of it came from them actually bashing me, even though I was young. Was it tough? Yeah. It's, it's ostracization. It's the old way. It is tough, and it does in some ways wear your psyche out. But if it's merged with an understanding, if you get to learn a little bit about what that whole thing means, if there's somebody there to actually explain things to you, I feel like in that some ways, in some places, that has been lacking, and I would want to reintroduce that rather actually just explain to people, to kids when they start working, how why it's important. At any rate, that was a massive sidetrack. So yeah, so if you look at it that way, in terms of pace, efficiency, all these things, most of the time, two people, any two random people, they're not going to work alike. They're going to work in the same fashion. And when you get to higher paying jobs, more specialized jobs, executive jobs where you have to make executive decisions, it's really hard to tell what part of your past experience is going to be influencing you when you just so happen to be in that exact moment of making a decision that's either going to cost a company $20 million or make it gain $20 million. But be damn certain that that decision at that time is going to matter. 20 million, give or take, decision. And that's ultimately at the core of why I think that you can never really tell exactly, you know, we can make all these kind of measures about and anticipate exactly how much somebody's input into a company or into a job is going to be worth. But it's really, really hard to get really nitty gritty down to exact details. And most of the time, you don't know somebody's worth until after the fact, when you either have to fire a CEO because he was talking crude to the staff, harassing female coworkers, the Owen Power case, or he made a decision that tanked a company, or the other end. So makes a decision that takes the company from to just skyrocketing. Can't really tell all of this. It might have everything to do with education. It might have nothing to do with it. Your gender or sexuality or anything might, as a part of who you are, might play a part in how you do your work. Might influence it in a good way or a bad way, depending on what you do. Or it might have nothing to do with it. But this whole equal pay for equal work, it just too easily equates all of us to ants. And even at that level, insulting the ants, because they're a lot more remarkable creatures than a lot of you would anticipate. They're very impressive, actually. So even ants would be more specialized than for anyone else to just assume that they all function and work the same. So yeah, it's just a very, very tricky claim to make. This whole thing, and that's just one of the many claims that that gender studies people that I speak to and hear from, coming from a gender studies background, it's one of the many claims that they cling on to, that for these many reasons that I've just listed out, I have a hard time accepting. Thus, the whole validity of that. It's empirical discipline. Yeah. So, but at any rate, as I've said so many times before, any discipline that wants to demonstrate its value as an empirical, valuable science, valuable to society, just go ahead. I was willing to listen and take that. But yeah, so we have these things. I went on to a massive sidetrack there. Second, yeah, it's these various stories that truly at the core of things here. So needless to say, for all these many reasons, gender affairs discourse has been all over the place, on fire, and Icelandic civil discourse and online discourse in the last few months. Me Too thing, the Reykjavik energy thing, and well, now since this drummer was accused, it's almost as if all the feminist movement leaders and Me Too movement leaders and everybody just went absolutely silent. Yeah. So, maybe they're all of a sudden going to be on the side of due process, of not letting the mob rule dictate everything and trash the entire code, legal procedure, and whatnot. Maybe now they'll, make an excuse and say, well, in this case, innocent till proven guilty. Just in this case, but apply it to every case. Because quite frankly, and this is what has troubled me the most about whole this whole thing with the hashtag Me Too movement and the way in which it has backfired. It's backfiring immensely, and we're hearing from everywhere in society, here in Iceland as well, states and various other places, that men trying to avoid women in the workplace and in various places they don't want to be. Um, they don't want to train them or work too closely with them or be in a room with just with one other woman or any of these things. So one-on-one meetings, they're starting to try and avoid that. And if that's the climate, if it's just going to be evolving as a climate of skepticism, severe distrust, then obviously so that's just going to tank the entire economy like this, no doubt about it. And had 20 years of this whole egalitarian agendas in workplace, in industry, in the large, in the marketplace and the public sector. 20 years, and this is what the final product's going to be. Then yeah, that's an utter complete failure and should be discontinued. Just as of today, as of yesterday, uh, I I don't envy CEOs or size and bigger leaders at this point. Uh, Massive staff to try and keep track of, and all of this brewing. Businesses should be allowed at this point to just given their freedom back to take these matters into their own hands. Just determine whether they want to put surveillance cameras all over every office space, and I'm seriously not kidding when I say that. That will be if I was a CEO with a mixed staff of a certain size, I'd be considering putting surveillance cameras and say, you know what, you guys, if I can trust you to trust each other to actually work and function together, then yeah, you guys are just gonna have to live with the fact that there are cameras all over this place. So any one of you says or does something disrespectful to someone else, or accuses someone of doing something even when they didn't, which one of you guys is going to be right is going to be up to the judge, because we're going to have the video footage of it, we're going to have the audio of it, the court's going to see that. So all of you just be on your best freaking behavior. That would seriously be one of the strategies that I would be considering. Another one would be um, if people wouldn't be able to function with that, or if it would be too expensive, then I would care a bit less about gender equality in the workforce, in terms of just equal representation of male versus female. I'd be looking at it, if I have a majority of women working in this department that's functioning fairly well, I would rather have to cut out the guys. And if I had a majority of men over there and that's sort of functioning, I would be looking at cutting off the women. And just for the sake of not having to have this blow up into a shitstorm, just for safety, I would be considering these things. And if they are considering all of these things and more options, I don't blame them. The law alone, because of these egalitarian measures, laws preventing business owners now in a very tough and challenging time actually making these decisions, then and it's really up to politics. Then politics are going to be responsible for the economy tanking if it tanks as a result of this. Well, politics and the radical gender politics lobby. Yeah, it's absolutely not a pretty thing. I do think for some companies they're going to have a very hard time justifying cutting people loose, just randomly firing people as a precautionary measure in case they have a gender shitstorm. Yeah, so I think the most realistic option would basically be surveillance. I'm certainly someone who does not like the idea of surveillance. Pro counter surveillance measures really have a massive people's interests, customers, your workers, whether they like it or not, your shareholders, everybody, all these people's interests in your hands. Then yeah, you just have to suck it up and do what you got to do. Maybe announce it up front, guys. Tomorrow we're gonna put a shitload of video surveillance. It's just it's not a pretty situation. It's not a pretty atmosphere. I can't imagine this psychological byproduct of this. Can't imagine healthy for anyone, society at large, to go to work every day. You know, with all of these things hovering. Am I gonna be harassed today, or am I gonna be wrongfully accused today? You know, what's gonna happen? Um, is so and so gonna misunderstand this if I say it like this or like that, or how should I conduct myself to talk to someone, or like, or on the other side again, you know, did he mean it like this or did he mean it like that? Did he so and so saying a joke, or are they? Is there something subliminal? Like this whole suspicion and paranoia. It's, you know, in the long run, it's just gonna wear everybody out. How can you focus on doing your job? You know, if you're being by constant suspicion of everybody in the workplace and constant paranoia and this and that. It's just such a mental drain. You know, just really troubled by it. But yeah, at any rate, you know, at least people surely are talking about it. You have the harshest words to say on these things, you know. Speak up. Speak up, because the worst thing at this point is the conversation. It's just gonna have to take its course. This is not. Iceland is generally a country that's doing really well in most ways. Sustainable. Even now, you know, we're having a lot of shit storms happening, especially with aviation. They filed for bankruptcy. One that just managed to get the finance it needed. It was looking at potential bankruptcy as well. And then the Bastion, Iceland Air, longest running company, pulling some severe measures in terms of just redesigning their operations. So there are layoffs and there are changes in strategy and all these things. So yeah, it's been tough for not just those, but in other industries as well. Sort of, we're seeing a slight reduction and pullback in so currency been strengthening a lot, so it's going to put strains on fishing, etc. Key export industries are going through some turbulence. There's turbulence in aviation. That's kind of been the ongoing joke recently. But in spite of that, you know, these are tough and resilient companies. Iceland surely is an experienced, resilient. Which also to be very rare aviation. So yeah, that's but at the same time, you know, this were to emerge as something going rampant society, then that could surely put just the entire country at risk. This is a kind of cognitive disease, produce a cognitive disease all across society. Really, really just puts it to a halt. Who knows? Maybe that's what some people want. In which case, suggest to them that they're wishing for something just inhumane to actually reach conclusion. Some people could get behind. Reach some sort of find some measures that will allow companies, industry, economy to function. Actually, just go to work, be focused, do their job, go home, take care of their loved ones. There's to it. But yeah, that's all there's to it. And somehow still it's not a given. At any rate, another long wrath long rant and I can't even speak anymore. That's it for now. Definitely. Biking out.